Welcome everybody to the Q3 2020 League of Extraordinary Marketers for the Sports User Group. My name is Jason Semenek and I'll be hosting today's call. In case you don't know me, I'm a senior marketing lead strategist at Tegrita, and I have a special focus in sports, entertainment, and content production. So we've been doing these quarterly calls for quite a while now, and as you can see, we're working hard to kind of improve the experience for all of the attendees. And one of the um, big changes is that we're now using Click Meeting for these calls. So our goal for these calls has always been to spur conversation and sharing amongst sports teams and talking about what works and what doesn't work in the sports marketing world, because it's a little bit different than the rest of the marketing world. And so we're introducing a couple of things to make it easier to participate. So we've moved our meetings to Click Meeting here. That makes it easier for us to chat, or for you to chat with us, ask questions, where we've got a couple of new features with polls and surveys. And so if you'd like to chime in at any time, just unmute yourself. You'll see you've got a mute button there, and simply unmute yourself and chime in if you've got anything to add to the conversation. You can also use the chat button. You'll see that there's a chat box available, a chat pod they call it here, where you can begin a conversation and have people respond. We also have a Q&A feature where you can send in a question or a comment for us to share for you on your behalf with the rest of the group. And so just to make sure that we've got this all working correctly, I'm hoping everybody can go to the chat pod and just type in a yes or a hello, or let me know what the weather's like in your area, just so that I can see that our chat box is actually working. All right, I see James and Jessica have commented. A couple of other people are writing. Perfect. All right, good. Okay, so that seems to be working. The chat box seems to be working. Thank you so much for that. We also have changed up the format of the actual this user group a little bit as well. Rather than Tegrita just presenting information, more like a webinar, we're trying to change it a little bit and have it be more of an open conversation with more people participating in these conversations. So that'll be a little bit of a change that you're going to see as part of the strategy portion of these calls. And so if you've attended these calls before, you'll recall that we break it into three sections. We have our strategy session at the start. We'll still have our partner presentation, and today we have Fable presenting for us. And then Jesse Noby from Tegrita will still get technical with the Oracle Eloqua specific information. Today he's going to be talking about Oracle Eloqua apps. And just a reminder that that last part of the agenda is really focused on Eloqua. So if people are not on Oracle Eloqua, you can drop at that point and you won't miss anything too important for you. So so that's kind of the big changes that we're talking about making today. And so I'm hoping that everybody will take advantage of that chat box, the public one or the Q&A section, and chime into the conversations. And so let's take a quick look at today's agenda. So today we are going to be talking about the marketing automation strategy part. Is going to be about league restart marketing strategies. You know, we know that a lot of different leagues are already in play, and some are looking at starting up soon. And so we want to kind of brainstorm ideas that are working, things that the leagues that are already back to play have experienced, what they're noticing is different, and how we can share and help everybody improve their marketing as we restart the seasons. Then, as I mentioned, we'll have Fable, our content experience platform, presenting, and we've got a good bit of slides there, and very specific to sports marketing as well. And then Jesse Noby will come on with the Oracle Eloqua how-to in terms of extending Eloqua with apps. That's what we're going to be covering today. And so really and I wanted to apologize for the font when we uploaded the PowerPoint into Click Meeting. Some of our fonts got replaced. As you'll see, some of the graphics got pixelated. And so as I mentioned, first time using this platform. And so we're experiencing a couple of difficulties, but nothing major. And so yeah, you'll see some interesting fonts throughout. Enjoy those. And so as various leagues start to return to play or are planning to restart, the marketing machine for each team needs to really ramp up as well. We need to rebuild that hype, re-engage our fans, really share information. And that's what the point of all of this call is going to be about, is really what's been working for you. So I get a lot of team emails, and I've seen some pretty interesting and creative ideas out there that teams are using to try and re-engage the fans. I always try to take a critical look at these emails, as I'm a fan, but I also look at them from a marketing perspective. And I like to evaluate how a specific market might respond or engage to those particular marketing tactics. And so just as a reminder, I know I've shared this list in previous sports user groups, but I've changed up some of the wording here. But just as a reminder, I've kind of seen that the content that's sent out by the sports industry really fall into four big broad categories. You've got league information, that's a bit higher level. We've got more specific team news, where fans, that's what really hypes up the fans, I think, is the team news. There's marketing and sales specific initiatives where it's really about the data and enriching the data that you've got in place, and getting additional consent, and supporting sales efforts, trying to customize that communication that you're having with folks. And then the fun one, the engagement tactics, where it's been off season for a while for some of the leagues and some of the teams, and so how do you get that hype? How do you build up that enthusiasm and that excitement, even if your team isn't currently playing? And this is really your chance to have some fun, get creative, and do something that's a little bit different. So. So to get things started, to try and spur that conversation, I'd like to start out with a quick survey. And so the first survey that I'd like to put up here. So how would you gauge your fan engagement with your marketing tactics versus pre-COVID times? I know that a lot of teams are seeing reduced engagement. If your teams are participating in playoffs, perhaps you're seeing increased engagement at this point in time. So I'm hoping that people can let me know, from your point of view, what you're experiencing in terms of fan engagement at this point. And my guess is that we're seeing a little bit worse engagement overall, especially for teams and leagues that are playing in off seasons. So if they're, for example, the NHL is playing in the middle of summer, and so it might be a lot harder for you to be able to engage with your teams. I'm thinking about other leagues that don't have concrete plans for starting up yet, and so that makes it really difficult to market, and figure out what to say to your fans. And so we'll just give people a couple of seconds here to get their answers in, and decide if it's way better, same, worse, or way worse than before COVID. Okay. Thanks everybody for voting. All right. Yeah, so it's looking like most of the people on this call are really experiencing a bit of a downturn. The majority of the people are seeing less engagement overall. I'm hoping that some of you might be able to give me an indication of what's going on. Either unmute yourself and chime in here, let me know what you're seeing happen, or use that chat box. Let me know what's going on in terms of your marketing. Are you seeing a reduction in budget that's affecting your ability to market at this point in time? That might be something that's playing into these things. And so, with less revenue coming in from seat sales and television revenues and potentially sponsorships, I'm expecting that there may be reduced budgets available. Maybe people can chime in on the chat module if you're seeing a reduced budget or same. Yeah, let me know what's going on in your marketing departments right now. And I see Clark is here from Oracle. Hi, Clark Murray. Hello. All right, so I'm going to close up the voting for now, and let's share the results here. Okay, so can everybody see the results? I want to make sure that people can see how everybody ended up voting here. All right. Perfect. All right. So, yeah. So as expected, 5 of our attendees today who voted, 15% said it was the same as before COVID in terms of their engagement, which is great news. I'm really happy to hear that. On the downside, about 27% of our people said that it was worse. That the marketing engagement right now is worse than before COVID. And Clark, I'm going to just ask you from your point of view. I know that you work with a lot of other sports teams that don't necessarily attend these calls. What has been your experience in hearing from those teams as well? Are you getting the same feedback from those teams?
Yeah, can you hear me? Absolutely.
Yeah, there we go. We can hear you now.
Yeah, it's a tough one across the board. I feel like football still has some hope because they're starting up the season and things could change mid-season. Basketball and hockey are now kind of up in the air as far as starting in December or January, and still aren't sure if they're going to be able to sell tickets, and that not being able to sell the tickets has been a huge hit.
Yeah, I imagine. Yeah, that budget revenue, or that revenue coming in, is probably going to affect every department on every team. I'm sure that leagues are suffering, teams are suffering, marketing departments are suffering, and so yeah, that doesn't surprise me that we're experiencing, that we're seeing that. And yeah, so have you heard from teams in terms of what their engagement is like as well? Are if other teams, are you seeing the same thing from them, that they're having a tough time engaging with their fans because it's off season and various other reasons?
During the playoffs and before that, there was a lot of engagement. I don't know, as some of the teams might want to chime in. I don't know what's happened since the playoffs have moved forward and more teams have kind of gotten out of the playoffs. But I know it was really high initially. The fans were hungry for content. And we saw a lot of teams working on sponsorships, digital sponsorships to keep fans engaged and drive sponsorship revenue.
Yeah, if there's anybody on the call who'd like to chime in on that. I know, for example, Tampa Bay just moved on to the next round of NHL playoffs, and I'm not sure if we've got anybody on the call from Tampa Bay, but their marketing machine is really ramped up, and they're sending out quite a few emails right now, and they're really engaging their fans, because I think they're one of the few hockey markets that's still in play, and so they're really trying to take advantage of that, even though there's no home games per se. They're really trying to be innovative and creative in terms of what they're doing to engage their fans. And so, is there anybody from Tampa Bay on the call right now? From the Lightning? Nope, I'm not hearing from anybody. Okay. Yeah, so that's a very thanks for chiming in there, Clark. I appreciate you providing some feedback there. I think I think that all the teams are going to be suffering a bit right now. I was hoping that there might be some teams that were experiencing an uptick, but I think you're right. I think football is one that's potentially going to be one that might be okay in the long run. There's a lot of unknowns right now. I'm also looking at tennis is another one where I suspect they might be able to pull off a bit of a season here, and be able to do some of their tours. But overall, I suspect that basketball, hockey, baseball, they're all going to be suffering as we go through all of this. So I've seen some really neat innovation in terms of working with players and coaches to try and raise some hype. I've also seen this be an opportunity for people to really start pushing their local charities, or for teams to start pushing their foundations or their charities. People are really excited about people doing work in their own communities, and so anything that you can do to drive that kind of excitement is always a big deal for your fans. And so teams are taking the opportunity to maybe not talk specifically about the team or about the league, because there's some ambiguity there, but one thing that always goes a long way is that charity. And so engaging your fans and engaging the teams to start communicating with the fans about the benefits of those charities and the great work that you're doing in your own local markets. I think that's a great opportunity that I've seen a couple of teams taking advantage of as well. All right, I'm going to do another quiz here, or another poll. All right, so on this one, with all of the changes because of COVID, what has changed in terms of your marketing focus? Has your focus changed in your fan emails? Are you now more focused on driving TV viewerships as opposed to seat sales? Is it still the same? Is it still those email engagement metrics? Are you really trying to push people to social more, so that people can watch videos or engage with you on social networks? Merchandise sales. I know that a lot of teams own the stores and are responsible for marketing their stores. And if there's anything else that I didn't consider here as kind of the top 5 or 6 items, let me know in chat. I'd love to hear from everybody what your new focus is. I suspect that things have changed. It's no longer just about getting bums in seats and selling season tickets. And so I'd like to hear from the teams in terms of how that's changed in this world of COVID, now that you're not necessarily focused on seat sales. I'm going to call on while people are voting here, give people a few more minutes to vote here. I'm going to call on Sid from Tegrada. And Sid, I know you're a big fan of several teams, and you're in Toronto, and I'm sure that you get a lot of team emails as well. What are some of the interesting things that you've seen from a fan perspective in terms of innovative marketing by the teams that you follow? Have you seen anything interesting recently?
Most interesting thing I've seen out of this whole COVID pandemic so far is the fan board that the NBA basically showcases during the games. It's not so much marketing, but it's the most interesting thing I've seen so far post-pandemic.
Cool. Yeah. And so tell us about that. So for people who don't necessarily follow the NBA, what is the fan board?
So because teams are struggling to get fans into arenas, obviously at the moment, what NBA has done is they have a massive partnership with Microsoft, where they have fans basically on webcam showing up to each game. It's been a cool fan engagement way just to get people involved. Obviously, while no one can actually be at the stadiums at the moment.
Cool. Yeah, it's a neat way of getting people engaged and engaging online in a way that isn't as commitment heavy as actually attending a game. So yeah, it's a great way to drive that. Yeah, thanks, Sid. All right, so I'm sharing the results here again, and so yeah, it looks like there's a couple of the teams are sticking to the traditional metrics, so opens and clicks, and so that's good. I think that's a good thing that you're sticking to your guns, you're sticking to your original plan, and really focusing on that email engagement. But at the same time, it looks like more there's been a little bit of a shift over to encouraging more social engagement, and so driving people to Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, getting fans to engage with you through those social networks, which is a great low-cost option. It does take a bit of work. I'm actually interested to see that driving TV viewership hasn't become a bit of a bigger priority, but that's interesting to me. I expected that driving TV revenue would become a bit more of a focus for the teams. But in the meantime, I do see that seat sales. Um, yeah, so Ken, thanks for chiming in there. I'd love to know why no one picked TV viewership as well. So partnerships in particular are going to become more and more important as there's fewer seat sales. So if anybody has any feedback, are you getting pushback on the TV viewership side of things? Are you sticking to your traditional platforms and traditional metrics? Does anybody else have some feedback from one of the teams on what your team's view is of that TV viewership side of things? Feel free to use the chat box to answer that. But Ken, thanks for chiming in on that. I know that you work with several different teams as a marketing consultant, if I remember correctly, and so you're working with several teams. What's your view on that? I know that you seem surprised by it. So what's your outlook on TV viewership and pushing that more through the marketing machine? And in the meantime, I'll just point out again that merchandise sales remains a priority for some of the teams, and that's I did expect that as well. I did expect that this is an opportunity to drive fan engagement with potentially sales or offers or deals to people to try and keep them engaged, and so that when the teams do come back to play, those fans are more decked out. They've got more paraphernalia. They've got all the gear that they need to become a super fan. And so I'm glad to see that some teams are focusing a bit more on merchandise sales, because that is a revenue stream, and it can be a significant revenue stream, especially if the primary driver of seats is no longer there. So that's a very very interesting one. And so if there's anybody on from a team that would like to chime in on why you gave the answer that you did, I'd love to hear about that. But maybe again, I'll call on Clark. Clark, if you don't mind, I'd like to get your feedback on this. Are you seeing more like a steady push towards the opens and clicks, or are you seeing a change out in the real world as well?
No, my first thought was TV viewership might not be covered by the folks on the call. They might be more around email engagement and social engagement, ticket sales, season ticket holders, things like that. That was just my theory. I'm not sure.
Gotcha. Okay.
But it's probably also cheaper. I don't know what I haven't heard anything about viewership and broadcast revenue, how that worked with the NHL or NBA and the bubble. If anyone wants to chime in on that, I'd love to hear, was it what people expected? I know it was a complicated thing, and you had games in the middle of the day, so viewership was lower. But I don't know how that worked.
Mm-hmm. And how the revenue sharing model panned out. How much is the league keeping versus sharing with those teams that are actually playing? Yeah, I'd love to hear some team feedback on how that's all. I agree, Clark. I think that's a very good point.
Hi, this is Jenna from the Bulls. Can you hear me?
We can hear you now. Thank you. Hi.
Great. Hi. I think I answered personally social engagement, and the reason that I did was that instead of pushing folks to TV viewership, what we did was ask folks to sort of follow along with our only TV event in recent memory, which is the draft lottery. So we wanted them to follow along with coverage that we could control, and they could see a Bulls point of view from it. A lot of our television is directed by the league, and then we end up with a revenue share from that. and we can control things like signage for home games, but that's just not in our immediate future. So, and even when we had the Last Dance going on, right in the beginning of COVID, we did issue, a few different emails that showed people where they could tune in. But what we did was also then point them to specific videos or specific pieces of content. And the best way for us to do that was social engagement, because then they would also see the content, but then be able to interact with it, share it, comment on it. So that's why I answered that one.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Jenna. And that being able to engage, I find email is often a one-way communication, and whereas social allows people to actually put their comments. And the Last Dance is a great opportunity for people to get hyped up about stuff prior to the bubble starting and games resuming. And so that's a very innovative way of doing that. Yeah, thanks for sharing your thoughts on that. All right, and so this one is a multiple choice one. You can choose as many options as you like. So I'm curious about what new tactics you're getting the opportunity to try during COVID. So I do understand that some teams are doing less marketing, and so that's a budget related thing or a business decision. Some are not able to make any changes to what they're doing. They're already locked into a plan. But I'm wondering if any teams are being able to try something new, something that they haven't had an opportunity to do before, or if they're putting more effort into certain channels or certain efforts than they have in the past to try and try and engage their fans in a different way if there's not actually anything on TV. And so I will mention that if you do choose other, feel free to put what else you're doing into the chat box so that we can see what everybody is focusing on and what new things people are trying. And I do apologize for those people who are unable to unmute. We're not sure what's going on with the click meeting here. We're trying to resolve it, and hopefully people will be able to talk and unmute themselves in a second here. But in the meantime, feel free to use the chat box to provide your answers. It does look like a lot of teams are, from the results coming in, it looks like a lot of teams are emailing more. I think that's kind of our bread and butter in the marketing world right now. And so I'm not surprised that more email is taking a priority. It's something that we're familiar with. It's something that's easy for us to do. Generally, it doesn't have much of an incremental increase in costs. So I'll just give people a few more seconds to put in their answers on this one. All right, it looks like the voting has wrapped up. So I'm going to end the voting and share the results with everybody. So really overall, it looks like what I expected. There's a couple of teams that are staying the course or doing less marketing, battening down the hatches, trying to just make it through to the restart up and to the next season when hopefully things will be a bit normal. And then the majority of the teams are trying more email. They're really trying to increase that fan communication, fan engagement through email marketing. And then also that increase in social. Again, a low cost, easy way of getting engagement and keeping the fires lit while you're out there with nothing going on in the real world. Now I see that one person did vote other, and I'd love to hear from that person in the chat what other things you're doing. Graham, thank you. SMS, yes, that is something that a couple of teams have actually approached us about is talking about adding SMS and direct text communication. Whether it's real-time communication in terms of providing scores or game updates or things like that. Graham, what was your success with that? What have you found to be the results of using more SMS? And then Ken says social media, free pass to new things. Yeah, yeah. And so an interesting question from Ken about why people aren't using social more. And you know, in theory, as you say, it's free, and a great way to engage your fans. And so I'm interested to see, you know, maybe it's that, you know, I'm talking about new tactics. Maybe there's more tactics out there that or more teams out there that were already, you know, pretty heavy on the social side of things, and so it's not new for them to be heavy into the into the social side of things. All right, so Graham is using SMS for transactional season ticket holder communications. Yes, great. That's great. And Graham, what league are you in? Awesome. Thank you. So yeah, the Seattle Seahawks. Super. And yeah, and if anybody else would like to join in, if Sid or Jesse or anybody else on the team would like to provide any feedback, feel free to jump in here. We'd love to hear your thoughts on things as well.
Well, I did just want to jump in and talk a little bit about some questions we had recently from one team about email reputation and the volume of communications. You know, like how does that all work? And you know, we were on a call. We were able to look at their actual send patterns directly in the product. You know, over a period of a few months. And one thing that you'll see a lot of times is that communications are really spiky. You know, they go way up, way down, way up, way down. And my recommendations there are, you know, I think a lot of people sort of maybe they think in the back of their minds that your volume needs to go up and up and up and up and up and then sustain this high volume forever. And I don't think that that's really the case. You know, I think that naturally, especially with sports, you're going to have an ebb and flow around the seasons and major events throughout the year. So my advice there is, you know, to look at some of these tactics that we're talking about um, and different ways of communicating and arrange those around those major events. And I don't know, you know, if everybody's really familiar with this concept of IP warming, you probably did it at some point. But you know, you don't have to do it one time and one time only. So when you're maybe going into the season, several weeks out from the season is when you want to start ramping up again, right? So you're essentially going to go through another IP warming campaign, and that's where you're just going to start adding to your volume gradually over a period of weeks to build that engagement and get people excited again so that when the season is going, um, you're getting, you know, less bounces and a higher throughput of those emails. And then as the season's coming to an end, you can sort of ramp down and not destroy your reputation, and you just do it gradually, you know, instead of like just a drop off in communications. That's what's really going to hurt your sender reputation is losing the consistency in like a sudden way, you know what I mean? So that, you know, that was something that I thought was kind of illuminating in that conversation for that team. And you know, I think it also sort of gives you that, it gives you the boundaries, you know, the constraints to then look at, well, what do we have on our calendar? What sorts of things can we send? And then apply that, you know, in a more systematic approach to maintain your reputation or improve it for that matter.
Yeah, great point, Jesse. And you know, we did cover that in one of our previous sports groups, sports user groups, where we talked about, you know, keeping the lights on in the off season. You know, you don't have to maintain that super high level that you might have during the season, but you do want to have some sort of regular communication, and make sure that you're able to you know, maintain that brand reputation. If you suddenly go completely dark and then cutting back with some news and hit your entire database of 3 million fans, that's going to affect your deliverability and your reputation. And so, you know, like Jesse said, figure out ways to keep the lights on in terms of an ongoing email engagement, but maybe take this as an opportunity to start to use other platforms to enhance those communications as well. Thanks, Jesse. Excellent point. And I know a couple of people on the team mentioned that. All right, we've gotten a little bit over in our time. Did anybody have anything else that they wanted to add about, their experiences with the league startup, and their thoughts about, some good marketing tips for other teams to try as they begin to ramp up their efforts? I'd love to hear about that in the chat box. We will continue to monitor the chat box throughout the remaining sections of this presentation. But for now, I'm going to wrap up the sales or the strategy side of things. So thank you everybody for participating today. I hope you liked the format a bit more. I think it was a lot more interactive for everybody. And I love hearing from the teams and from Clark. I really appreciate you jumping in and providing your feedback from what you're seeing out in the marketplace as well. Really appreciate that. So please watch for emails with details on the next LXM Sports Marketing User Group, which will take place in November. Also a reminder that you can see all of the past user group sessions as recordings, and we'll be able to see the recordings of today's call starting next week in the Tegrita Learning Hub at activate.tegrita.com /sports-entertainment.